And we are live.
Hello, Dr. Energy. How you doing?
Hello, Rara is in the house.
Here I am. Oh, I have to tidy up my thing here. Oops, there we go. Good to see you.
We'll zoom in a little bit. You can't see it. You can't see
Yeah,
my stuff that way.
All right, let's talk about talking, presenting, and stories. What a difference. Like, how is it when you talk to someone and you're thinking, get to the point, or you're talking to someone and they bring you on a journey and you really are on the edge of your chair listening to them?
It's interesting. We always kid my mom about when she tells stories, because she tells, well, wait a minute, I have to go back to, and she's like, it takes her forever to tell a story because she's got to tell this part, but then she has to go back further for the like side story to tell part of it and another part of it. And I'm just like, get to the freaking point of the story already.
Shout out to Josephine, who makes the best biscotti cookies in the world. Shout out to all the things she does great that I miss.
Unfortunately, she doesn't make them quite as much anymore. She's more on the helper side of it these days. But
okay, well, I'm on the taster side of it.
Yeah, well, the ones my sister made with the help of my mom this year were like one of the best in probably the last 5 or 6 years. So.
And why do I not drive there when you guys get together again? I don't understand this. Why am I not placing myself in that table? I don't know.
So stories, stories are really, really important. Our minds are wired for stories. I'm gonna go I'll put myself here on solo for a second.
Yeah, go ahead. Bump me out.
I'm going to give you the spotlight in a minute too. Okay. So, story. We are hardwired for stories. Our minds are hardwired for stories. We've evolved our communication technologies over the last, never mind 100 years or 150 years, but the last 15 years, even the last 10, last 5. It just keeps escalating faster and faster. But our minds are still wired for story. You could go back to the times of like Abraham Lincoln, and he would stand on a tree stump. And that's where the term stumping came from, by the way. For politicians, they would be out stumping. They would literally stand on tree stumps above the crowd and speak. And you had to learn how to relate to people and how to tell stories to attract their attention and keep them engaged. And Lincoln would talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and people would be enthralled because he talked in stories. As I said, our minds are wired for stories. We think in terms of narrative. We enjoy consuming content in story form. There's a reason we all love, most of us anyway, it's probably I don't know if it's 100%, but most people love Pixar movies, right? The stories that they tell, it gets us. And for those of us who sometimes who are emotionally sensitive, sometimes, we get a little tear here and there because the stories are so well told. They speak to us on a deeper level. And that's how we can connect with people.
I love when I'm sitting in an audience, and often I've heard Cody talk about stories he tells about his dog Gus, and you're thinking about him catching that dirty tennis ball, and you're listening to the story, but you're imagining that you're there. So when you get walked through a situation, and Cody talks about bouncing the tennis ball and throwing it, and Gus, his dog, who was his dog, used to go and get that dirty tennis ball and bring it back, but he wouldn't drop it to get the clean tennis ball. Right. And as he would tell that story, he was up on stage and you were idolizing and looking at the presenter, and you knew he was going to tell you something good and funny. You sort of knew that you were going to get a good story from Cody Bateman every time. And it stood in our mind because he actually would use visuals of the dog with the dirty tennis ball. And then he would bounce the clean tennis ball as he was talking. So when you're telling a story, as soon as you get this sound, just stop. You've made it.
Yeah, you've got the room.
You don't even have to say another word. Right. And if somebody's on stage, obviously you're looking at them, you're focused on them, you're not multitasking. You feel like you're there. And the way you really know if you tell a good story, if someone starts telling a story or finishes your word or your sentence,
right,
presenting to someone, and you could get some kind of a theme going, and you could place that in a happy spot in their mind, and they could go, I feel really good. You're telling a good story.
Right.
And that audience will remember your story and the emotion that they have.
Right. It's what's that saying? You got to hit them in the feels. Right. So people feel something. And this is a big difference between presenting and storytelling, so presenting or storytelling slash speaking. With presenting, people get up there and they just throw up slides, and they go right to PowerPoint or Keynote, and they start creating slides without first thinking to craft a story and connect with their audience. And then you can storyboard it. I mean, this goes way back to Presentation Zen. We've been talking about this for over 10 years.
Yes.
And the creating that storyboard first before you jump into a PowerPoint or a Keynote helps you create a better presentation, right? The slides should support or enhance your story and your speaking rather than be dependent on it. Basically, you should be, if you were not there and you gave your slides to somebody to present, they would have no idea what to say or do, because the slides may not at first glance look like they fit with the presentation, but they need you there to tell the stories behind it.
And if you're creating your presentation and you find yourself searching for all these different images, and then you're shiny penny, looking here, looking there, if you do not know the basis, the foundation of what your story is, those images should be supporting your story, not creating your story based on, well, I think I'll have your colors, your fonts, have all your decks ready. Create a story that comes to life. Let you be a live storyteller. Think about when you were young and someone would read you a book. If nobody read you a book, I'm sure this time you heard a good storyteller. And when you use your voice, when you use your tone, when you use a soft tone or a loud voice and a noise, you can get attention from people.
Right.
You can keep their attention, because you can get attention, but do you lose it?
Right.
How do you maintain that vibrato? One way to do that is to imagine yourself as the listener. Would you want to listen to you? Would you stay focused? Some people, you stare at them because they're just, knockout, drop dead gorgeous, and you don't care what they say. And that's fine. But there is a point where you are there for something. What did you get there for? And are you getting what you came for? And I think it's important to not only have an image, but to have some substance.
So here's what I'd like to add to that is, we know that directors, producers, screenwriters, before they even pick up a camera to start filming, there's a script has been written, a story has been written. Then they storyboard it out. They draw little diagrams. Sometimes it's stick figures. Sometimes it's a little bit more involved. It could either be on pen with colored pencils and paper. It could be digitally online, whatever it is. They storyboard first, and then they go through it and see, okay, where do the different elements fit in the story? Does this one down here need to fit up here? And does this one over here then need to come down over here? So, and then once they've got it in place, into a coherent story, then they start looking at what assets, who are the actors, what would the dialogue look like? What would the costuming look like? What photos, videos, music do we want to add to it? And this is how we can approach our engagements. And I'm not going to call it just a presentation, because a presentation is not just slides with text and bullet points. We don't tell stories in bullet points. We have it's like having a conversation. So when you set out to create a professional, engaging storytelling presentation, sit down, write it out first, like you're telling a story. Then storyboard it. What are some of the images that are brought to mind based on the story? What emotions are you trying to engage with people with? And then start to look for videos or pictures or music to add to your presentation so that it enhances that storytelling and that presentation to people.
Think about a process. If you were working with an app, you would have a step and then another step. And if we decide to haphazardly go from one place to another without thinking about, does it really make sense to someone who knows nothing about the topic? Imagine you're talking to a 7-year-old. Will they understand the story that you're telling, or are you just going to give them so much information that they're going to hope they have to go out and buy a newspaper? Remember those days?
Oh, yeah. And this actually leads into the next point that we wanted to talk about, is that presenters use text. Storytellers love pictures. Everybody, I'm sure most people remember Chris Hadfield on the International Space Station, and he became a social media star, superstar even, because he told stories. He took pictures of the Earth. He was playing his guitar. He sang Space Oddity while literally floating in space. I mean, that speaks to something inside of us, especially those of us who remember the song by David Bowie, and the whole idea of how that song makes us feel when we think of somebody floating alone in space, cut off from the Earth. And there he is playing it on his guitar, floating in space on the International Space Station. So the pictures evoke something deeper in us. And so if we can either use pictures, actual physical pictures, or we can paint a picture with our words and our stories, we're going to engage people more.
Think about someone wanting to stay till the end of your sentence without wanting to interrupt you. That someone's really paying attention to you and they want you to finish, and not finish so that they can speak over you.
Exactly. There's a well-known effect in psychology and psychology of marketing and everything, and it's called the picture superiority effect. there you go. How did that make you feel hearing the sirens? Right? It's just like this the wonders of live audio and video. So the picture superiority effect is that if people see and hear, so they see a picture and hear information, they're going to remember 65% of the information you shared versus only 10% if they only see words or text. So 10% by words and text only, 65% if you put a picture with your storytelling. That's a huge difference. So it's like this, 10% down here, 65% somewhere up here. That's a big difference. And what is it? What's our favorite quote by Maya Angelou? Catherine?
People will forget what you say. They'll forget what you do, but they will never forget how you make them feel.
Exactly. Connect with people, make them feel something, or not make them feel, help them feel something so that you can connect with them. When we tell stories that are, true or relevant in our own life that we had a feeling about, people will connect with us with that. And they'll feel it too.
You know what just happened when the fire engine fire truck. I got like hot and I sort of perked my attention up. That is a true example, a great example of how a storyteller could surprise an audience. So if you, leading into the next talking point, if you can surprise your audience, it wasn't planned, but you will remember that there was a moment where something came in. So some people use special effects, some people break out and dance or song. When you can surprise your audience, they will have a moment that's anchored in their mind. So you might want to strategize that into what you're doing. I sometimes take a cymbal or a tambourine or something and use it. It could be in the background. Some people can take things and make a sound or make a noise. You can decide what you do to surprise the audience, and to what degree do you wish to surprise them. Wardrobe malfunctions, or all kinds of surprises. You can do them visually, auditorily. I've this one shirt, you always tell me not to wear that blouse. There's always a problem with it. I just love it. It's like this butterfly cool thing, but it never stays closed. You're like, every time you wear that shirt, but it's a surprise to me and to the audience. I wear two shirts now so that I can wear that shirt. The element of surprise is great because it elevates, it lifts my blood pressure. When I have very low blood pressure, I just felt warm. I thought like, oh, what was that? So it gave me a bit of a, wow, let me pay attention. Plan that. plan doing that to your audience and see what they say. Like, wow, when that fire truck went by, like I was really remembering, and you can relate back to it. You can talk about the point in your presentation. I love when you do this, Dr. Energy, when you talk about something positive and something negative, and when you use this is like the best tip ever. I don't know if you want to talk about it today or
Sure.
not, but I love when you do that.
I think it'll speak to it in our next point, but just to finish off this point about surprise, our brains are wired for novelty. Our brains want to look at different things, see new things. Like you were just mentioning to me earlier before we came on live, that there's aspects of your life at the moment that you're busy, but you feel kind of bored. And it's that search for novelty, for something new to keep us invested, to keep our energy going into something new. And this is the art of telling stories. When there's an unexpected twist or a turn to a story, our audience is going to go, wait a minute, I didn't expect for that to happen. But when we are presenting in PowerPoint, the reason that nobody wants to see a PowerPoint presentation, death by PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever you're using, the reason it's boring is because it's predictable. You see a slide full of text and you see 2 or 3 of those in a row, and you know that most likely every single slide is going to be filled with text, and it's just going to be the person reading the text to you when you can read it faster than they can speak it to you. So you read it faster, and then you sit there waiting for them to finish the slide. It's like, come on, hurry up, I'm bored. And then you start opening new tabs in your browser, start checking your phone because now you're bored. Or if you're in a live audience, you obviously no tabs in your browser, but you start checking your phone, or have a conversation with the person next to you because you're bored. So that element of surprise is what keeps people engaged. So that, in part, to speak to the fire engine and why you kind of got a little warm, perked up, is that we have now, in our culture, we have associated sirens with an emergency. And an emergency means there's potential dangers, and our nervous systems are wired for that. So we go into the fight or flight response. Our adrenaline picks up, our heart rate increases a little bit, which, so now more blood is going to the muscles, getting them ready to be active. So that actually raises our body temperature because there's more blood flowing from the core out to the body. We feel a bit of a flush.
Does that equate to a workout? Oh, sorry.
It does burn a little bit more calories. I mean, it's short term. I mean, it's, even exercise is stress, creates the fight or flight to some degree, but it's how we perceive the stress that determines our overall response to it. But when we hear those sirens, we're conditioned to respond, emergency. And
so does that mean that we could create the weight reduction storytelling moment? We can just have all these surprises and you can just burn calories while you're sitting down listening to us?
I don't know if it goes that far. That would take a little bit more actual research to determine that, but
we could stand up. You tell us stand up every 7 minutes to change our position, not to be sitting down.
Right.
Even that in itself maybe won't give us weight loss. But a lot of us have been sitting.
But it keeps the energy. It keeps the energy moving. Keeps the blood flowing. Keeps us interested. That's why at these events we do know that from research, and there's this group that I follow online called the Flow Collective. And when we get into a state of flow, our energy level, the vibrational level actually goes up. And our minds become more engaged. We become more open to novelty and learning new things. So part of when we go to these live events and the presenter is or the person on stage, the speaker is having a stand up and high five people, dancing, massaging the person next to you. All of these things are because that builds human connection for one thing, which creates that connection amongst us, and that elevates our level. But also that jumping around, the dancing, it all creates a higher energy state that helps us stay in the flow state. And we actually take information in at a deeper level in that flow state.
Just to tell you this, you're right. You're right. If the audience isn't sure, we just did an ecstatic dance class.
Oh, nice.
We did this for my birthday party. with I had a joint birthday party. We had our eyes closed, the
Mm,
music on. Everyone was smudged with Palo Santo prior, and we were closing our eyes and moving. And it felt amazing.
right.
We didn't even know where we were going. Just try doing that. Try moving around. So if you're telling your story and you want to have a bit of a whimsical approach, you can move around on the stage. You can don't keep your back to the audience, but if you want to do a spin or you want to put some particular movement to it, don't be afraid to do that. You
Right.
don't necessarily have to stand like a soldier staring at the camera. It is not the way to you tell a
Right.
story, you pick something up, you drop it, you throw it, you put your arms, you do what you have to do. You bounce a tennis ball like Cody does. You do what you need to do so that you are being you.
Right.
And you're telling your story authentically, and you can surprise the audience with a move. You'd ever walk
Exactly.
into an elevator and not turn around?
I have a funny story about that.
Tell me.
So I remember being, where was it again? It was a hospital downtown, and I'd been visiting somebody that was sick and recovering from a surgery. And it was with a couple other people. And then we got in the elevator, and I'd been telling the story, or the idea of this story that I'm about to tell you, to the same people just before we got on the elevator. We get on the elevator, and I made sure I was the last one on. And it wasn't just our small group. You know how big those elevators are in the hospitals, right? Because they fit the gurneys in them and everything, right? So you can fit like 20 people in one of those elevators, right? Elevator was full. It was the middle of the day, so there was a lot of people. And it was downtown Toronto. A lot of people coming and going. I made sure I was the last one on the elevator. And I turned around, had my back to everybody, and then I turned around, faced everybody, and I said, "I'm sure you're wondering why I called you all here today." And the whole elevator just cracked up laughing, because there was some somber faces, and you could feel, how you feel when it's in an elevator in a hospital. It can feel a little bit dense. And
Not
I
a
turned
happy
around.
place.
It's not necessarily a happy place. And so I did that, and everybody just cracked up and laughed. And so the people that I was with laughed the hardest, because I'd just been telling them this story that I had read somewhere, that somebody else did this on an elevator. And then they're like, "Oh, that's funny," as if anybody would ever do that. And so I said, "Okay, I'm going to do it."
It's the element of surprise in
Element
a
of surprise.
30-second story. No one says your story has to go on for an hour.
Exactly.
However long or short your story is, it can still be impactful with the element of surprise.
Right. And that leads us into the next thing. And you talked about preparing for surprises and how you rehearse stories. So why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
How you rehearse? I like to talk about Madonna.
Mm.
Gosh,
This is one of my
love
favorite
Madonna.
stories.
When Madonna is getting ready, when you're getting ready with your team, with your crew, with yourself,
Yep.
Madonna brings her team together to say, "We did a fantastic performance. That was amazing. That was awesome." Muhammad Ali would say, "I am the greatest." So when
Right.
Madonna came together prior to giving her performance, so think of your presentation, your storytelling as your performance, as what we
Right.
are doing here tonight. So prior to, you reinforce how fantastic it was for everyone, not just I feel great, but for the audience, that the audience's experience was exactly what they wanted and more.
Mm.
Then Madonna would go and present. She would speak. She
Perform.
would dance.
Yeah.
Right. She would do all. Now you hear her talking a little bit more. Prior to going out on the stage in front of the mic, prepare yourself
Right.
mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. Prepare yourself so when you go out there, you give your best. Yes, know your material. Okay, read your notes. Get rid of them.
Right.
Put this in your head that you are the greatest and give the best performance you can. That's being prepared.
Absolutely. I remember I had a teacher in high school, and she was also the volleyball coach for the girls' team, young ladies' team, whatever, high school. And we used to say, practice makes perfect. And she said, no. She said, perfect practice makes perfect. And what she was really saying is that you want to practice the way you're going to perform. And I think this speaks to what you were talking about with Madonna, and how they would envision in their mind the perfection, the connection, the engagement of their performance before they went out on stage. And this is why performers do live rehearsals. They do live rehearsals, then they do dress rehearsals where they're in costume, because they want to know, how does the costumes work? Do we have to change them? Are we going to have any costume or wardrobe malfunctions when we're out there on stage? We want to get these things ironed out before we give the performance. And most presenters forget that they're performing, and they just get up there and present. They just dump data to the audience, and they don't actually perform. And the performance inspires, it entertains, it engages your audience. We talk about it here at BU Network: edutainment, part education, part entertainment. We need to combine those things to have people engage with us, to create an environment where people want to come closer to engage with us. And so when you are practicing your storytelling, practice it the way that you're going to deliver it. If you're going to be up on stage standing, then stand when you practice. Practice where you're going to put the pauses in your storytelling. Practice your vocal variety. Does your voice get high sometimes? Does it go low sometimes? Do you whisper sometimes so people have to listen even more closely? A little ASMR there for you. So
okay, I'm sorry.
I'm just about finished. But if you're going to be sitting on a Zoom call, then sit on the Zoom call, but practice it out loud. Most presenters that I'm aware of, and this is the way I used to do it when I first started, was I would just flip through my slides silently, and because I knew I had all my presenter notes there, so I knew that I could rely on those. But when we start to practice telling our stories, it becomes more engaging, because we know our stories of our life better than anybody else. And even if you leave out a part of your story that maybe you wanted to put in there, in the moment you just forget it. Just keep going. Don't apologize. Oh, I forgot something. Just keep going. Your audience isn't going to know that you forgot something or you left something out. If in the moment your story leads you down a slightly different tangent to the story, go with it, because you want that engagement with the audience, and they're not going to know that you changed the story slightly.
You made me think about, don't wing it. Don't walk into a presentation and say, I don't need to practice. I'm just, Jimmy Dick would talk about how he uses the Rolodex in his head and how he doesn't necessarily read and write his presentations, but he's a great storyteller.
He tells stories.
Amazing the way he tells the story. So I recommend that you don't wing it. And if you are the night before, you find yourself the night before scrambling because you have a presentation,
right?
I want to invite you to take a look at, is that the way you want your audience to feel? Do you want your audience to feel that energy? If you could be ready emotionally, mentally, I make that a whole new word, mentally. If you can be ready mentally, emotionally, spiritually, then you're ready.
Exactly.
You're prepared. What if technology fails? What if your light goes off? What if something happens? We need to be able to deliver under any circumstances. So remember the fire truck. And if you got a little warm, you go with it. You just bring it into your story like Dr. Energy did, and you go with the emotion that is right there. So if you can get an emotion from your audience, and hopefully it's positive, maybe you want them to cry, whatever your story is about. Once you get that emotion, then you know you have arrived.
When we're authentic with our stories, the slide software, the presentation software doesn't have to get in the way.
That's about having your audience cry, or whatever you want your audience to do, is that when you get that emotion, you know that you have touched them and you touched your audience by allowing yourself to be human and vulnerable. And you are a real person. You were not a robot up there about to tell someone in some way how to achieve something. You are and were, and you always are very authentic, Dr. Energy. Thank you for sharing that.
You're very welcome.
Could you just talk package? Yes. Can you talk a little bit about doing this and doing this when you're saying something?
Oh, right. You asked me about positives and negatives. So I'm going to go full screen so it's easier to see and I have more hand space to see. So basically we want to remember that in the West with English, we read from left to right. So see what I just did there? I went left to right for me, but for you, it's right to left. So it's actually backwards. So my physical body language is going to be opposite to what you're expecting, the way you normally respond to things. If I said we go from the past to the future, it's backwards for you. And it doesn't make it, there's a disconnect. So your message isn't going to go over as well. So if we do instead from past to the future, it's backwards for me, but it's in the correct orientation for you. It's the positive over here. So positive over here. See, I just did it myself. Positive over here or negative over here. Or we could do negative and positive is probably the better way to do it. So when we're speaking, if our stage isn't very big, we can just do it with hand gestures. When we talk about negative things, we gesture with the negative. When we talk about positive things, we gesture with the left. If your stage is bigger, you can anchor it not only with your body language, with your hands, you can actually walk over to the right side of the stage and then gesture with the right hand and say whatever the negative things or the cons or whatever the counterpoints are to whatever you're presenting. And then you go over to the left side of the stage and gesture with your left hand and talk about the positives, what the pros are to your argument or to whatever it is that you're presenting. And this just helps your audience anchor things and be able to take the information in more easily, because if you do one negative point over here and then you walk to the other side of the stage and give it another negative point, and then you come back over here, do positive, and then another negative over here, and then a positive over there, it gets confusing for your audience and they're not going to know, or they're not going to, on a deeper level, it's not that they're not going to know, but it's harder for them for the whole message to be coherent. So that's why we want to use these types of tools and strategies when we are speaking.
I love that you talk about that, because you could have a big smile on your face when you go to the positive, and you can lower your voice when you go to the negative. Whenever we teach this and we talk to our audience, and I'm listening to people speak, I would love to say two things. Know who you are and know that you are fantastic and that you gave the best performance that you ever could. And know that when you smile, your audience feels it. I love the movie Eat, Pray, Love, where Julia Roberts says, "Smile from my liver."
I've read the book, but I haven't seen the movie.
Oh, it's so great. And he called her groceries. Smile from the inside so that your audience feels that. So if you want to use the gesture like Dr. Energy just recommended, and you're going to find a positive and a negative, when you get to that positive, give a smile. Do a body gesture that really supports that. And when you with the negative, find something that works for you. Lower your voice or do something with your body that your audience will know exactly what the difference is when you're going from left to right or right to left, however you decide to work with that.
And then be consistent with it, right? Because if you start mixing it up, and you may mix it up a little bit at first, and this is why we practice before we go on stage.
Yes,
right? We want to practice the way we're going to do it so that we can get it down. Then when we get on stage, then we have it down and the message becomes coherent.
Well, Dr. Energy, if someone wants to practice, they can practice with us. They can record themselves and they can send it to us. They can put us live in their recording studio and we can walk them through it.
And even better, we created a channel on Volley, or a space in Volley. And the link is going to be down in the description after. It might even be there now. We'll definitely be on the replay. That you can come and join us in Volley, and you can actually record something in Volley right in there, and we can give you feedback on it right there. So nobody else needs to see it. So that is a great tool to have in your back pocket.
So come Volley with us.
Come Volley. Spike.
We like to have fun. You know who used to do that with the ear. Thank you so much for having this time together. It's really fun to be back and to be on and to be live.
Yes.
And to share what we have planned for our audience.
Exactly. All right. We'll see everybody same bat time. Well, same bat channel anyways. We're experimenting with some different times for our live stream. So keep an eye out here on the channel, subscribe, ding the bell, all of those things so you can get notified when we do go live. And also if you want to sign up for our newsletter. You can check it out over here at b-u.network/bu, and you'll get the emails so that when we do go live, or you'll be able to get an email ahead of time, and you don't have to wait for the notification.
Or just stay on your toes and watch us.
All right.
All right. Ciao.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you on the other side.